Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Eden Road podcast, where on today's show we're going to be previewing the Leicester game at home on Saturday. Delighted to say that Jake Watson from the Big Strong Leicester Boys podcast is here to join me. Jake, quiet week as a Leicester fan?
It's never quiet as a Leicester fan. It was weird because before Steve Cooper got sacked, which I know we'll get on to, which we didn't see coming, but didn't see coming. The week prior to that was international break, and despite the fact we hadn't actually played any football, it was arguably the worst week of the season. We had a couple of players go down with big injuries. Looks like our main shirt sponsor are going bankrupt. And it wasn't a particularly good week. And then this week has been the complete opposite, even though we lost it at the weekend. So it's ups and downs. It's mad. Honestly, I say it all the time, but I don't think there's another football club like ours. I know every football fan will think that about their own club, but yeah, it's been mad to say the least.
Yeah, I bet, mate. I bet. Just before we're going to get into all of that. But just before we get going, remember to drop a comment down below, subscribe to the YouTube and Spotify channels, follow us on the socials at the Ealing Road on Twitter, at Ealing Road Pod on Instagram. Also, if you haven't already checked out the Everton full-time show, go do so now before listening to this preview. And there's also a full-time analysis show on my channel, and the link for that video will be in the description of this one. Right, Jake, you mentioned it. Let's start with the big news. Obviously, a bit of a surprise for maybe people outside of Leicester. Was it the same was it the same from a fan's perspective that Steve Cooper's gone?
So there's two parts to it. We were surprised, but only because we didn't think that the owners would act as soon as what they did. But I would say 99% of the fan base would say it was the correct decision. So we're pleased. We mean that with the greatest respects to Steve Cooper. It's a very difficult job, and you could argue he was on a hide into nothing from the start. But he just never won any of us over. And, if we want to do like a bit of a metaphor with maybe a relationship and a girlfriend, if you're in that relationship and it's all right, but she's not the one, what do you do? Do you carry on and on till it gets worse, when there's some other potential suitors out there who would be better for the job? And ultimately, I think that's what the club have done. That, during the off season when Enzo Maresca left, we were told that we wouldn't have any money to spend. It looked like we were nailed on to get a points deduction. So hardly any managers wanted the job. And ultimately, Steve Cooper at that time was the best for the job. He was the only one willing to take it, the only one with any kind of real Premier League experience. But fast forward to November, whilst we've not been brilliant, we're still out the relegation places and we're not getting a points deduction. And suddenly the job becomes a whole lot more attractive to other managers out there, which ultimately looks like the man that we've got. So yeah, it's been mad, but I think the fan base are all very happy with what has happened. But again, we say that all with the greatest respects to Steve Cooper, because he didn't do anything wrong. He just wasn't the right man for the job. And I think everyone recognised that, including the owner. Otherwise, you just wouldn't act, would you, after 12 games?
Well, I remember when he was first appointed, I spoke to a few Leicester fans and they said it was a pretty underwhelming appointment. And I don't want to sort of bring the Forest links into it, because I don't think that was really a factor for most Leicester fans. But what would you say the main reason is that he's got the sack?
Well, I think there's a few, again, because it's never black and white, is it? And it's never straightforward in football. The Forest thing is interesting because every Leicester fan, again, will tell you they're not that bothered. They don't care. But by the same token, mate, if you were to look at right now, say, for instance, that Van Nistelrooy comes in as the manager, he starts in this position of excitement, and ultimately now what Ruud will have to do to get sacked is to lose the support of the fan base, because right now he has it. But for Steve Cooper, because he's come in from Nottingham Forest, and also he got sacked by Nottingham Forest, a team that wasn't very good in the Premier League, what he has to do is win over fans. So it's the other way around, isn't it? And, he came straight in. So it was underwhelming, then reaction. The signings were very underwhelming. And then pre-season was horrific. We were going through games of not even registering a shot on target. And that kind of then rolled on into the season where, we were good for 20 minutes, 30 minutes here and there. But at no point did you ever see any real progression. At no point did you see what he was trying to achieve. And again, without kind of wanting to focus on other clubs too much, but say, for instance, when Mikel Arteta went into Arsenal, it wasn't a roaring success immediately. but you could see what he was trying to achieve. He got rid of these players. He was bringing in these ones to form this kind of identity. So it's kind of like, okay, well, we'll be patient with what he's trying to do. But with Steve Cooper, he just had no idea. The tactics and the formations and the personnel and everything else was just different in every game that we saw. And it just, for everyone, it just felt like it wasn't worthwhile offering that patience for him. And yeah, so that was a big thing, that he had to win people over, and he never did. But also a huge part of it as well was, which isn't his fault, was the playing style, right? He has a style of playing. He's managed at other clubs before. This isn't his first job, so you knew what you were going to get when you employed him, right? But he was replacing Enzo Maresca, a guy with a completely different philosophy of football. So for 12 months prior in the Championship, we were doing very well and very successful. I know it's in the Championship, but they've had this way of playing drilled into them. And he's now gone on to Chelsea, and I think we can all say Enzo Maresca looks like an elite manager. And then Steve Cooper comes in, and it's a complete chalk and cheese way of management, even from a man management kind of style to a tactics kind of style. And the players just weren't having it. And again, that was a big part of why the owner acted so soon, because the players weren't enjoying the manager. They weren't buying into what he was trying to do. So that was a big thing. It was a playing style, and the fact that he had to win people over. So he needed to get off to a good start, and he just didn't.
And I remember as well, like when one of the reasons that Leicester fans thought it was an underwhelming appointment is that because he hasn't, apart from getting Forest into the Prem, which is a big achievement in and of itself. You look at what Nuno's doing with Forest now, with largely the same squad. You can imagine maybe he's just not that caliber of manager. But you mentioned Ruud in your answer. Thoughts on him coming in? I think it's not. Has it been officially confirmed? But it's basically confirmed.
Yeah, so it will be confirmed. I hope. I end up with egg on our face here. We've posted as such, getting very excited by it, so we all could look very silly. But we think and hope it's going to get announced today. What that means for the weekend in terms of if he picks the team, if he's in the dugout, we're not quite sure yet. As I said, it depends whenever this announcement happens. Hopefully it's today, and then he's with the players tomorrow, and at least he's involved at the weekend, because it will give everyone a lift. But we're excited by it, and look, we're aware that we may still get relegated. We're aware this might not work because he hasn't got a huge amount of experience, but we all see it as a risk worth taking. There's so many parts to this which makes us excited. But for me, I think people look at him and say, "Oh, he's a young guy. He's not got much experience." Well, I kind of disagree. He's 47 years old. This isn't someone who's 33, 34 who's just come out of playing. For the last 10 or so years, he's been learning his trade as a coach. And, he's been at the Dutch national team on 2 separate occasions. He was the head coach at PSV Eindhoven, and he won 2 cups in that one season. They didn't win the league, but they lost the league to Arne Slot's Feyenoord, a team at that point who were absolutely flying. And you speak to any PSV fan, and we've done the due diligence. I've messaged a couple of ones that we know, and they said he was brilliant. And, what he was particularly good at is that they won all the big games, the ones against Ajax. And if it wasn't for that, he had a falling out with the people who ran the club, he probably still would have been there and won a whole lot more. He's then obviously gone to Manchester United, which again in itself, just being an assistant is a great experience. And then in the interim spell, he got a reaction out of the players. Now, I know that, again, you shouldn't really read too much into someone being an interim manager, but he hasn't failed anywhere. He's been involved in some big clubs, and everything he's done, and when he has been involved, it's been positive. So, I think he's got enough to say, okay, he's worth a chance. And for us at the moment, we need a lift. Brendan Rodgers was a good appointment, a really exciting appointment, and and proof was in the pudding in terms of what we did. But since then, it's all been a little bit underwhelming. When Rodgers went, they tried to hire Jesse Marsh. They ended up with Dean Smith. Then in the summer, they tried to get Scott Parker. Luckily, we ended up with Enzo, but that was kind of fortuitous. It was only because Parker turned us down. And then in the summer, we ended up with Steve Cooper. So, and also worth pointing out as well that whilst we've had some incredible highs, and it's been remarkable. My lifetime supporting this club since COVID, which massively killed the owner's business, which was duty free. the money ran dry, right? So we've not even had an exciting signing. We didn't spend any money on players. We've had underwhelming managers, and I just feel like the whole place needs a lift. And someone like Ruud van Nistelrooy, of his stature and name, is just going to get a reaction out of the fans, and hopefully the players as well, and hopefully that gives us enough to get a reaction nice and early now, stay up this year, and hopefully Ruud's got a plan for the long term, whereas it looked like Steve didn't.
In terms of the season so far, is it hard to kind of separate disappointing performances with disappointment with Steve Cooper? Because coming in, it's going to be difficult for Ruud. Well, I imagine I'm hope that he's not in the dugout on Saturday, because new manager bounce looks like it's a real thing at times. But in terms of like the season being so disappointing so far, and in terms of what Leicester fans want for the rest of the season, how do you separate what you've seen from the players with what you've seen from Steve Cooper, if that makes sense, and how Ruud can come in and kind of affect how the players are playing?
No, it does make sense. And that's why I kind of said at the start, we're very conscious that we could still get relegated, because we understand and we recognise where we're at. We probably are within the weakest 4 or 5 squads in the Premier League, right? So people need to understand that Steve Cooper wasn't sacked because of where we are in the league table. Yeah, it contributes towards it because we weren't going well, but it was a bigger picture. The players didn't like him, the results weren't good, and there was no, discernible style and plan. So even if, and I know this is a big claim, Ruud comes in and brings in some younger players, signs some players which we desperately need in January. Say, for instance, we've got no strikers, really. We've got too many central defenders, but none of them are any good. If he comes in and identifies these things that all the fans can see, which they've been saying for ages, because we didn't, Steve Cooper didn't sign a striker in the summer. We signed one central defender, but by the Ipswich game a couple of weeks ago, every single person who played that game were there last season. We haven't got any money. Steve Cooper spent 70 million, and none of them had really improved the starting 11. So if Ruud van Nistelrooy can come in and identify the issues and look like he's trying to kind of build for the long term, then we'd almost accept going down. Now, I can say that as a fan, because obviously what I want to see is long-term progression. I want to see exciting football, which obviously we didn't have at all under Steve Cooper. But within all of this, a big part of why they've acted now is because it's really important for this football club to stay in the Premier League this year financially. It's no secret, is it, that if we go down to the EFL, they're waiting like a pack of wolves, because we failed their financial kind of FFP, but they couldn't charge us because we were deemed a Premier League club. So the moment we go down, they're going to charge us. Whereas on the flip side, in the Premier League, as you know, escaping that PSR thing, if we fall short of that again, then we're going to be hit with big fines. We're not going to find another loophole over again. So it's really, really important from a financial standpoint that we stay up this year, because you would genuinely really worry. And I've touched on it right at the start in terms of the sponsor as well. I mean, they paid an obscene amount of money, and it was a sponsor we didn't want because it was a gambling company. The fans weren't happy about it, but the owners just turned around and said, well, sorry, we need the money. And now we look stupid because it looks like this company we didn't want haven't even got the money. So, if we go down and we then lose the Premier League money and, the potential money from the shirt sponsor, we're going to be in a bit of a hole. So as I'm saying, as a fan, just want to see progression and a plan, but the owners, that they need us to stay up financially.
You're not short on drama, Jake.
No, never. It's mad.
Let's talk about the game, and maybe just before then, because I was listening to Darren Fletcher, who's on the BBC the other day, and he was talking about how the owners are the owners culpable to an extent. Is there any kind of mood amongst the fans that is now against the owners? Because rightfully so, you said at the start, you've had really good times in recent years, and supporting Leicester, whilst it is a roller coaster, there's ups and downs. The ups have been really fucking good. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So is there any ill will towards the owners at the moment?
A little. So again, it's quite complicated because people who obviously don't support the club will look at it as, oh, you won the Premier League, oh, you won the FA Cup, you finished 5th, you've had all of these things. How could you possibly, dislike the owners, right? Again, and mate, I'm going to go with another girlfriend metaphor here, right? If you're with someone for like 4 years and the first 2 years were incredible, you won the Premier League, you won the FA Cup, amazing. But what if the next 2 years were absolutely awful? Would you stay with that person because of the first 2 years, or would you say, well, look, this just isn't what it used to be? And that's kind of where we're at. So there's a split in the fan base of some who say, well, look, they can do what they want. They gave us, the most incredible memories that we'll ever have. And then there's the other part, which is me, where I'm saying, okay, that was great, but also we have to recognize the here and now, and it's not been good. For me and a large part of the fan base last season, it was difficult because whilst we won the league, great, but we're still of the opinion that we should never have been there in the first place. The only reason we got relegated was because of the mismanagement of the club. We had the 7th highest wage bill in the Premier League. Brendan Rodgers was the 4th highest paid manager in the Premier League. And we got relegated, with a team with had Tielemans, Maddison, Barnes, Vardy, Evans. The list goes on and on and on. We got relegated and we walked into that. So we're angry about that still, because the things that happened there and then, they haven't really acted on it and made any changes. So, the person or the people who we blame are the people who the owner is entrusted with the club, right? So the chief executive and the director of football, they're still the same people. They haven't lost their jobs, and this summer, our transfer window. So that's again, the director of football, he employed Steve Cooper. Was that a good appointment? No. Would he face any repercussions for that? No. He signed Bobby Decordova-Reid on a 3-year contract. He's 33 years old. He did the same with Yannick Vestergaard, 33 years old. Neither of them are in the team. So we're stuck with these players now for 3 years. And that was a big problem which had the year we got relegated, that we had these aging players on big money that we couldn't shift. The club is effectively the exact same place as what it was 2 years ago. So we're really frustrated that the owner can't see that the director of football is frankly useless. And that's the reality. And again, you talk about the shirt sponsor. Who on earth has signed off that deal? And it's the latest in a long line of PR disasters by the football club. But the people who are doing these deals, the chief executive and the director of football, they seem bulletproof. And I've said, as whilst we're excited about the appointment of Ruud, ultimately nothing will change in terms of the ceiling that we hit until they sort out those 2 key positions. So the owner we like, is a nice guy, and also worth pointing out, he's the son of the guy who was, the man who, bankrolled our Premier League success. So, there has still been a slight change in ownership in terms of the running of the club, but he's just got too much trust in these other people, and the fans just aren't having it, and that's the frustration, really. Not necessarily with the ownership, but with the director of football and chief executive, and we just can't work out, why they've still got their jobs.
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes sense. I think that's what makes it quite important for Ruud to almost have a good start, because you can imagine if he comes in and he's not backed in January because we've wasted our money in the summer, there's going to be some protests from the fans, or there's going to be a bit of ill will, or at least outspoken ill will towards the director of football and the kind of higher ups. Let's talk about the game on Saturday, Jake. How are you feeling ahead of it? Who do we need to look out for in the Leicester team? What needs to change from the game against Chelsea that you played last week?
Well, everything. We were absolutely horrific against Chelsea. And again, it's quite funny because we only lost 2-1, right? And obviously when Cooper got sacked, people were like, well, what have you sacked him for? You only lost 2-1. Did you expect to win? And I was like, well, no, but did you watch the game? Right. And 2-1 flattered us immensely. We were hopeless. And Chelsea got to 2-0 up, and then they just stopped playing. And then we got a penalty right at the end, which made things look a lot better than what it was. As I said, it kind of depends, doesn't it, on whether Ruud's in the dressing room or picks the team or not. So it's a little bit difficult to say what to expect from a kind of a tactical and personnel perspective. And also what's kind of a little bit strange within this all is that at no point have we looked like a group of players who have down tools. We, by and large, usually it's because we went behind early on, but there's been like a spirited fight back. So you kind of trying to convince yourself, saying, well, look, they're still fighting, they're still playing for the manager. So it's not like, say for instance, when Brendan Rodgers, the back end of his spell, you could just see the players weren't trying. But that was never really the same with Steve Cooper. It was just more an issue where the manager clearly wasn't setting them up correctly. That was more the issue. So yeah, it all depends. It really does depend on whether Ruud's in there or not, because it's not like you're suddenly going to see a team fighting again, because we've kind of had that. It's just been a lack of quality. in terms of players to look out for, again, it's a bit of a strange one because there's probably two players who stand out. I'll start with the positives, and that's our goalkeeper, Mads Hermansen. He's an absolute superstar. I was surprised, amazed that Chelsea didn't sign him in the summer when Enzo went to Chelsea. I've got a sneaking suspicion they'll probably now just do that in the coming summer. But funny, actually, I saw on the stats in the Premier League that because Hermansen's kept us in game after game after game. Again, we'd been in a much worse position if it wasn't for him. But I've seen your goalkeepers made more saves than Hermansen, which I thought was interesting because we've been conceding like over 20 shots a game. So I'm thinking, how on earth is it possible that another goalkeeper's had to do more than ours? But he's brilliant. He's brilliant. And then the other one, which is a sad part, is Abdul Fatawu, our winger, who again is an absolute superstar who won't be with us for much more than a couple of years. But unfortunately, during international break, he did his ACL whilst on international duty with Ghana. And I think that could be a real hammer blow for us this season in terms of staying up. That he's the go-to man in terms of he wants something to happen. He's so quick. He's so direct. But yes, it's heartbreaking that we're not going to have him. So he's a massive miss. So then it just goes back to the old reliable of Jamie Vardy. And, he'll always be the go-to guy. So yeah. But then I'll throw in just quickly as well, Facundo Buonanotte. He's a guy we've got on loan from Brighton who was suspended for the game against Chelsea. He was nominated for Premier League Player of the Month in October. Again, an absolute superstar. And I'm amazed that Brighton let us have him for the year. Gutted that there's not an option to buy him. He's a £50 million player. So if he doesn't go straight back into Brighton's team next year, someone will pay big money for him because he's a brilliant player. Far too good for us anyway at the moment.
Yeah, no, I've seen some of his goals and some of his play. He is quality. Probably Brighton are just smart. The reason they didn't put the buy clause is that they know he's a player. So want to give him some game time. But yeah, no, he's been class. Last question from me, Jake. What have you thought of Brentford this season? Anyone in our side that worries you? We do have a pretty good home record. So I think besides the points dropped against West Ham when we drew 1-1, we've won every single game at home this season. So like I said, I'm just glad it doesn't look like Ruud's going to be in the dugout because then I would be worried about the new manager bounce. But yeah, what have you made of Brentford this season? Who are you worried about in our team?
I think people will say the same, won't they, with Visa and Buemo? They're the obvious two, but the obvious two for a reason. They're the go-to guys, and Buemo's goals have been really impressive. I think lots of people thought you'd struggle this year without Ivan Toney, which it doesn't appear to be the case. Obviously, you'd rather have him, I'm sure, but you've managed all right without him. And I'm trying to think as well over the recent years when we've been to your place, what our record's been like. I don't think it's actually been awful. It's not been amazing, but we've definitely won a couple. We drew Brendan Rodgers just before he got sacked. That was a 1-1, wasn't it? And I think that Tielemans scored an absolute screamer.
He always scores bangers. And yeah, I remember he scored it on like the half volley from a corner. It was like outside the box. I remember.
And the year before, I think we might have won when Maddison scored. But obviously we haven't got those players anymore. So yeah, I think our record's okay. But as you said, Brentford's home record is incredible. Our away record is pretty horrific. So we're just basically, I think, really as a fan base, hoping and relying that there's a big reaction from the change in manager, and that's what we'll hopefully get as a result. But I think it's unlikely we win. I think the big one for us is the following week when we've got Brighton and we've got Wolves coming up in home games, which obviously that's the point where we hope to see some kind of reaction in terms of the new manager. But I don't think there's any getting away from the fact you'll be heavy favourites for this just because your home record is outstanding.
Yeah. I think this season at home in particular we've been really impressive, but just the away game so far. I mean, we got a good point at Everton last time out, but definitely I think we've already equaled our home record for last season in terms of wins, which is crazy. We're only 12 games in. But Jake, honestly, absolute pleasure, mate. The Ealing Road podcast will be back for a full-time show post Leicester. Plus, if you already haven't checked out the full-time analysis show on my channel, the link for that video is in the description of this one. Just before we go, remember to drop a comment down below with your thoughts ahead of the Leicester game. Subscribe to the YouTube and Spotify channels, and also give us a follow on the socials at the Ealing Road on Twitter, at Ealing Road Pod on Instagram. Jake, it's been an absolute pleasure, mate. Have a nice day on Saturday, but not too nice.
Yeah, no, thank you, and good luck for the rest of the season. But again, just not on Saturday.
Nice one, mate.